Ladies and gentlemen, in the classic true crime anthology book, They Were Hanged, which was released in the mid 1980s, I've been mentioning this several times in our true crime podcast. But tonight we're going to be talking about a very interesting situation that led to the last hanging in Manitoba. Now, Henry Malanik was sent to the gallows in 1952 because of the results of a crime of passion. And in this case, he eventually killed a policeman and had to pay the ultimate price. Now, he was sent to the gallows on June 7th, 1952. Now, the case he was involved with occurred in 1950 and involved a City of Winnipeg Police Department member that was shot in the line of duty. Now, Detective Sergeant Edwin Ted Sims was shot to death at a scene of a domestic dispute at 19 Argyle Street. Again, Malanik was eventually convicted of that crime, and because of changes in policy within the province and on the federal level, he became the last man to be sent to the gallows in Manitoba. Now, Malanik had come to Canada as a child in 1912. Now, not very educated, he only had a grade 4 upbringing. He had been convicted of several break-and-enters at age 17, but had no further troubles with the law until, again, 1950. He eventually began an affair with a lady called Olga, the wife of Adolf Kafka, which was his childhood friend and best man. It was a fight over Olga's affections that resulted in a gun battle at their house in Point Douglas. Malanik and Kafka were eventually each fined $50. Tragically, several months later, their guns were returned to them in a very, very strange dispensing of return justice, as we say. Now, on July 15th, 1950, Malanik was thrown out of a wedding reception for being drunk and disorderly. He went to the Argyle Street house to see Olga, where he and Adolf got into a knife fight, sending Adolf to hospital. The police were then called, and Detective Sergeant Sims, along with Detective Jack Pichel and Detective William Anderson, responded to the call. Malanik had fled, but returned with a double-barrel shotgun. In an eventual gunfight, Malanik killed Sims with a shotgun blast to the stomach. Detective Pichel emptied his gun and discharged 5 shots at Malanik, but 3 only found their target. Now, as the gunfire continued, another rookie policeman shot Detective Anderson in the neck by mistake, and he would eventually later be fired from the force for his improper actions. Now, in October 1950, Malanik went on trial. His lawyer pled for a manslaughter charge, and after 40 minutes, the jury returned with a guilty plea, and Malanik, which was the case at the time, was sentenced to be hung. Judge Kelly had reservations and believed Malanik may have been too drunk to form an intent to kill. Now, in this case, this was enough for an appeal. Malanik was retried in May 51 and once again found guilty. Now, this is interesting, ladies and gentlemen. In the book They Were Hanged, in our previous podcast, we talked about the Joe Richard case in New Brunswick, the last person to be hung for murder, who was tried twice for the same case, but that was due to, I guess, a judge's instruction was improper. This was not, because basically the original judge felt that Malanik may not have been in a proper state of mind to understand what he was doing. Now, this time, Judge Williams on the case had no doubt of Malanik's guilt. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court, where it was denied. Now, at 2 a.m. on June 17, 1952, as 40 people watched on, Malanik was led into the execution chamber. The executioner, called Camille, wore a black beret and a Hawaiian shirt, and eventually pulled the lever. As Malanik hung from the rope, blood began to spurt, as his jugular had been severed. 2 minutes later, he was pronounced dead. It was the last time a man was hung in Canada's most humane and modern prison, Manitoba's Headingley Jail. Hangings did continue at other provinces until 1962. Now, the case of Malanik in relation to his execution came up for discussion, because if you know your history of it hanging in Canada, one of the last 2 people to be hanged in Canada, in Ontario actually, one of them had their head severed because of the disproportionate weight on the rope. Now, in relation to execution across Canada, because he shot a cop in anger, and maybe in the modern era, in the States, maybe it would lead to a state-determined execution. But I don't think it was enough, because he was basically having anger and responding to a situation. And the fact is, it was kind of the responsibility of the police to basically watch this guy, and some of the fault was with the police, maybe 10% of the crime, because they gave him back weapons from the previous incidents with his lover's, paramour. So, a very, very interesting case all the way around. And there was some talk about a Hollywood movie of this years ago, because Malanik, for many people, was considered very handsome and very modern looking for 1950s Manitoba. Looked almost like kind of a combination Greek-Italian movie. He did look like a movie star, which you see in the photo as presented in this podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening again. The True Crime Podcast. We're getting some positive hits. This is not done to exploit the case of execution in Canada, but just to tell the facts. Because Canada, after the Trescott case, it totally changed. But before that, I think between the era of 41 and 59, 61, there were some province by province question if execution was really needed as a deterrent. And the Joe Richard case, I totally agree. A rapist killed a young girl for no reason, a crime of anger, sort of like the Raymond case right now in New Brunswick. He was psychologically disturbed like Raymond. Raymond killed 4, Joe Richard killed 1. And if this was modern, if this was 1955, I would ask for the gallows for Raymond, because, he deserves to be executed for what he did, because he put a whole province under fear. And that's what Joe Richard did with the northern part of New Brunswick. But I think in this case, like I said, Malanik couldn't control his temper. But having a bad temper and killing somebody in anger, is that an executable offense? It's not for me to say. Because legally, I don't even know what states in the United States would do that. Because on appeal, he would be on death row still now. He would not be executed. Because it was Canada. You know how it worked here, ladies and gentlemen? It's a true story. Crime, trial, judgment, execution within sometimes 3 or 4 months. Can you imagine? You start the year alive and you end the year as an executed murderer. A very interesting part of our Canadian, legal history. So thanks for listening. Bye.